Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 242. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Mima Tipper about her debut young adult contemporary romance novel, Kat's Greek Summer. Rising high school freshman Kat is dragged off to Greece for a vacation to meet her extended family, ruining her own summer plans of training for the cross-country team and preparing for a successful transition into high school. Mima describes Kat's Greek Summer as a high-stakes odyssey for her main character, one of pursuing dreams, discovering love, owning her heritage, and finding her own voice. For this story, Mima drew upon her own memories of the summer following her 8th grade year, as well as those summers she spent in Greece with her extended family. In this episode, I'll chat with Mima about her writing journey, those aspects of her summers in Greece that she wanted to make sure she captured in her story, and why mining memories is so important to her writing, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Mima Tipper, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new debut novel, Kat's Greek Summer. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about this book and what inspired you to write it.
Okay. Well, Kat's Greek Summer is about soon-to-be high school freshman Kat Baker, who is all about spending her summer training with the high school cross-country team. Only her Greek mother has other ideas and drags her and her little brother off to Greece to spend the summer with the Greek side of the family. Between the heat and the cultural differences in Greece, it's really hard for Kat to keep her running dream alive, but she's determined, so she embarks on what I'm calling a risk-filled odyssey, during which she discovers that self-truth is at the heart of dreams, first love, even family, and that it is up to her to speak up and claim the heritage that is uniquely hers. And I was inspired to write this book. So I got an MFA at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and I actually wrote a draft of a novel to take to my MFA thinking, oh, this is going to be really a good idea to have something tangible to work on. And at that time, I was reading a lot of fantasy, and I just love fantasy so much. So I had this fantasy novel a YA novel that I was really excited to work on. And I spent my first semester working with my advisor, author Uma Krishnaswamy. And after the semester was over, she sort of in our kind of summation of our semester together, she sort of just asked me like if I would consider writing something more personal. And I was pretty taken aback by that suggestion because I was just really into my fantasy, and I was like, what? But I found her words really stuck with me, and because I'm half Greek, I immediately thought of writing something based on the many childhood and teen summers I spent in Greece with my Greek relatives. And once I started that, I just really saw the whole book. It was like, oh, okay, this is going to be really fun. So I just dove in, and that's where we are. That's the book that we came up with.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Kat Baker, your main character, because I'm curious, one, how she came about, and two, how closely she resembles you, given that this book, as you said, is a little more personal.
Okay, that's a really good question. I guess I didn't have any interest in writing like a memoir about those summers, like really, telling my story. And I'm like very committed to the idea of like creating like a gripping tale, like, or what I would consider a gripping tale. So I kind of thought of that time in life of, eighth grade, summer after eighth grade, where you're just going through this big transition and heading off to high school, and how many changes that can bring to a young person's life in many ways. So I thought, oh, I want her to be at that age. And then I just wanted her to be as opposite to me as possible. When I was young, I loved going to Greece. So I thought, oh, what if I have a character who just like really doesn't want to go and hasn't really been there very much? And why would she not want to go? And so, I put that character, I wanted her to be proactive, like she was going to have a plan instead of just kind of sliding into high school. This character was going to have goals and a plan of how she was going to make her high school experience meaningful. And that's when she focuses on running, and that she's going to spend the summer running with the cross country team because she sees that as a great opportunity to kind of make a mark right away in high school. And then she gets taken off by her mother. And the thing is that like as I was writing, like during the drafting process, a lot of feelings surfaced for me of my own experience about my family and my half Greek heritage. And I found my character suddenly like saying and doing and asking things of like the mother character and herself about her experience. And so I just let those feelings and experiences kind of inform her character more and more through, multiple drafts. And that, resulted in the book. And though her story is really fiction, she's not me. Many aspects of her story hold what I'm calling like an emotional truth that I discovered exploring my own heritage, growing up half Greek, half American, like how confusing it often was and how isolated I felt often and disconnected. And it just found its way into the story and just made sense that that's how she might feel. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about her family, the dynamics that play out in the story. What was important to you to kind of weave into the narrative, into the plot, what you felt was important for her to discover not only about herself but about her family. So can you give us a little insight into what's going on within the not just her immediate family with say her mom, but the larger family, the community that she discovers?
Well, so I chose to have her have a very limited exposure to the Greek side of the family. My own experience was that my mom, she married my dad, who was American. She came to this country and wanted to be American. And I've talked to quite a few people who have parents that are, they have that kind of two culture background where that's the case, that people come and they want to be American. So sometimes the second culture that I'm calling like the Greek culture in my case got kind of, pushed aside and not really focused on. And then so I made the mother character at a transition point where she wants to kind of reconnect with her own family and decides to take this big trip with the family, and thinks it's just going to be great. This is going to be wonderful. They're going to spend time with the Greek side, and she's just excited for her own kind of feelings. And then Kat going over there, as many young teens are, you'd think, oh, spend the summer in Greece. This is going to be the best thing in the world. But for her, it's just sort of taking her away from everything that she's familiar with, her plans. And when she gets there, she realizes, wow, this language is really different, and I don't really speak, I don't speak this language, and my memories of the place are not great because the only thing that's surfacing is the one time they came with the dad character who wasn't really connected to the Greek culture at all, and she could sense that her parents were having problems. So it's just, it's sort of problematic for her to have these feelings about a place from her young childhood. And then meeting the cousins and having people kind of all around her making a fuss about her and feeling like she just doesn't really look like these people or understand them at all. And she just felt very disconnected. And I have to say for myself, I often felt like that, especially as I grew into my teen years, just like, what are we doing here? This is so different from where we grew up. But the Yaya character, especially the Yaya Sophia character, is so rich in my mind because she's really, based on my own grandmother, just sort of plows through the that. She doesn't really, she has her own baggage with her daughter, but with the grandchildren, she's just really, all she wants is to be near them, even if she can't really talk to them, fluently. She really wants to welcome them into the home, into the culture, and have them be part of things. And I guess with the cousins, it's sort of a similar thing where I started bringing in a lot of my memories of how my Greek cousins kind of what they think of American culture, how they respond to American culture, and speaking English, and how important that is in other cultures to speak English. That kind of creates this strange uh, putting Kat in a not on a pedestal really, but sort of separate. Like, oh, speak to her. She speaks English. You can practice on her your English. And so I just kind of wanted to bring those feelings forward in her relations with some of the other characters in the story.
Yeah.
So,
I'm also curious, sort of the other character in the book was, which is the setting.
hmm.
What what was important for you to capture about Greece, Greek life, the village? What was necessary in order for people, for readers to understand what the differences were, what Kat was experiencing in the way of differences, but also maybe what was enticing about the area, what she might have grown to appreciate about it.
Well, that's a very good question. I feel like there are still many parts of Greece. I mean, certainly the village that I spent time in was just so completely different than anything. I mean, it was gorgeous. It was so hot and sunny. It was just, just like your eyes would just be, you'd just be vibrating. The heat during the day would just make everything kind of vibrate. Um, and I feel like it was important for me to have her be in this setting that was tremendously simple. And of course, it's based on a lot of my own experiences where, literally the cottage that we stayed in had no electricity. The only actual telephone was in the village. And, it was incredibly simple. And that isn't the case at that place anymore. But when we visited Greece, there's still places where things are very simple. There's not really necessarily access to Wi-Fi. People might choose to live very simply and have a cottage that's not plugged in necessarily. And the fishing culture is very strong in a lot of these villages. And there's still a lot of real simplicity. So I think I wanted her to be placed in an environment where she really was disconnected from her life. And I think often parents, I know that we did this sometimes. When you travel abroad, you're not necessarily going to buy into a foreign Wi-Fi plan. You're really looking for a chance to disconnect and not focus on things that are not where you are. So I really wanted her to be in that scenario where she was out of her element a lot. And I think of it as being like, oh, fish out of water. She's really fish out of water. But because of her cultural connection to Greece, that's even more pronounced because she really begins to wonder, like, what does it even really mean if you have family in a foreign place where you're not didn't grow up? Like, what does that actually mean in your body, in your life? How do you connect with those things? Is it really possible to do that? So I think those things became important to me writing her story, to have her thinking of those things as she spends time in the place.
I'm curious what differences you found. I mean, you mentioned that Kat is, or at least started out completely opposite from you at that age. But apart from that, her not being you, were there differences that you found in writing her experience for the summer that made you stop and think, well, I did it this way. She would now have to think differently or act differently, or there would be things that she's experiencing that you didn't experience back then. I'm curious what the differences were, and were there things that you had to research?
Well, I think I spent a lot of time talking to my mom before she passed away about those summers, and I think that for me, I just really just was the kind of kid that just went along and sort of did as I was told, and didn't really question my experience that much. And I found Kat that the difference for her was that she really does question the experience. So in the case of, say, where there's a time when the Yaya character tells her, you're not allowed to, go out during the, you can't go running off during the day wearing these very skimpy running clothes and by yourself during the day. So that definitely would have been my experience at that time, and probably an experience for a lot of young Greek girls, that would not be welcomed in the family, to allow your young daughter to go running off by herself, or at night, or at night or after dark or anything certainly like that. So I wouldn't have questioned that, but I found Kat sort of pushing up against that, because in her experience, why isn't she allowed to do that? And she's not, why does she have to kind of go along with this to sort of make everybody else comfortable? And so I found her more being more questioning, and not just going along. Like I never would have. I don't want to give too much away about the book, but I never would have considered, sneaking off at that age. But she's like, hey, this is what I want, and I've no one's really paying attention to what I want, and I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with what I want to do. It's just because people, don't like it, but I'm not doing anything wrong. So she still is trying to kind of advocate for herself to keep her dreams alive. And so I think that's a big difference that I between her and, say, like me in that experience. And also, just I think I would have been much more concerned about the kind of the patriarchy, the misogyny that is in many cultures, and certainly has been part of the Greek culture, of men having this view of what women should and should not be doing. And I think that she's much more like, I'm not gonna, like, wait a minute, I'm not gonna put up with that. It's real, I don't really care if you think I'm being a little rude here. This is not okay. I mean, she
Yeah.
feels it, but she's not necessarily going to put up with it. And I don't think I ever would have had the nerve to speak up about things like that at that age. So I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then what do you hope readers will take from this? Because the book is a YA read, a sort of coming of age kind of story. What messages do you hope that they will take away from the book? And were those messages clear to you when you began the story, or did you find them evolving as you wrote?
I think, what I would like my young readers to come away with is to really have faith in to find their self truth and have faith in it, and that they have choices, and that what is important to them matters, and that they don't have to just kind of go along with what they think other people expect of them or don't expect of them, and just to ask questions about their experiences. And I mean, there's a whole thread we haven't really gotten into it's sort of a subtle a subtle Me Too thread, where I call it, I actually wrote a piece about this, where it was about the feeling of being a young woman, especially, although I know many boys have this experience too, where you're uncomfortable, like somebody makes you uncomfortable, mostly and probably an adult that you feel like you need to be respectful to, and you're uncomfortable and you don't really know what is making you uncomfortable specifically, whether it's you that you're confused about someone's behavior toward you, or whether somebody actually is being a little predatory to you. And I feel like I've talked to so many, especially women, who it's like, how old were you when somebody made you uncomfortable and you didn't know what to do or what to say or whether you could say anything about it without people looking at you like, what are you thinking? Like, what's wrong with that? He's, that person is, he just wants to sit next to you, like, and sit a little too closely, or, maybe put his hand around your shoulder in some way that you don't like, but it's not like they're doing anything necessarily. Do you sort of know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And just not having the confidence to say anything about it. So that was kind of, that was in earlier drafts, that was a much, much more prominent thread. And just as I wrote, realized that the whole story didn't work if you had that one thread was more prominent. But I really wanted that to be part of her story, of what it feels like when people just make you feel uncomfortable and you're not really sure exactly how to respond, but that it's I wanted to have my character kind of figure out how to respond and maybe take that chance of speaking up and saying, "Hey, stop doing that. I don't like that. You're making me uncomfortable." So that's something I definitely am hoping that young readers will get, that it's not like a tangible story of, like, this is a story of somebody being groomed or being abused, or specifically, like graphically and tangibly. It's not that kind of story. It's just that it's okay that if someone's making you uncomfortable, that's enough to say, stop. I don't like that. It's okay to have those feelings and to say something about it. Because I feel like there's a lot of kids that don't speak up when something like that happens, and then maybe something else happens later on that's more even more traumatic. So anyway, I thought that was something I wanted to explore with this story.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you had written a piece earlier. So you've written and published some short stories, and now you have a debut novel out. I'm curious, which format is your preference? Is there one that you kind of gravitate towards or find easier to do?
Mm.
And going forward, do you have a kind of a plan for other works in progress? And is it a mix of both? Are you going to focus on one over the other? I'm curious what you have learned by doing these two different kinds of writing, and what that means for your future writing.
That's a really interesting question. I'm the kind of writer that I just like, I can't really write something unless I'm, tremendously inspired. Like, I have to really, an idea has to stick with me and just be, this is what you need to work on right now. So I love short stories. I think it's an incredible form, and I enjoy reading them. And those stories were fun to write. And I have written other stories they just didn't have like the full sensibility of a novel. But I do have another book that is going to be coming out in June of 2026, and it's a contemporary paranormal YA, a true young adult. The character is 17, set in the world of high school theater. um, so that's kind of all I wanted to say about it now, but I'll definitely be posting, updates on my website as things become more and more concrete. I think I really enjoy the challenge of writing a novel, of focusing on kind of an idea that requires whatever 60, 70,000 words to follow the arc of a story. But I'm open. I read everything. I read every genre. I love. I wish I could write a picture book. I mean, that to me is a beautiful form, and getting some incredible story across in just minimal words is a marvel, I think. Um, but I have to just be really inspired. So I kind of work on stuff that grabs me and holds on to me, and it doesn't really, I don't think like, oh, I want to write a short story, or oh, I want to write this form.
I'm curious about all the things that you've written so far, and then going forward. You mentioned that your writing instructor challenged you to write something a bit more personal, and that led to this novel. Is that exercise something that you feel that you will include in your writing going forward? The idea that you start with something personal, you look for something personal to put into the story or to use as a springboard for the story? Or was this sort of a one-off thing?
Uh, I think that this is the only, I mean, I've got many drafts of many novels, and I'd say the only thing that really seems to be a thread in all of the stories that I write is all of them seem to be dealing with character trying to find a place to belong, to figure out how to belong somewhere. And all of them seem to have some element of Greek in them, whether it's mythology or Greek. The character is Greek or half Greek or set in Greece. That seems to be an element of my personal history that has grabbed me and seems to be coming out in many of the things that I've worked on. But I think this so far, this is the only story that is, basically almost every single thing that happens in this story happened to somebody in my family, me or somebody in my family. And I've just fictionalized it and used it for fiction. And I really think that the whole concept of mining memories for fiction is fantastic. I mean, those are your stories. Those are truly your stories. And to give a real flavor to my work or a flavor to a character, I definitely plumb my life and and try to add those elements of, even if it's the opposite, it's like I love this place, but I'm gonna write it as though my character hates this place. So just to give some element of trying to make things as kind of authentic as possible. I mean, I think especially for children, for fiction written or work written for young people, is that they just know when something is not right at all, and they may not give you a chance if you don't engage them in a way that feels authentic to them. They don't have any qualms about putting your book down, putting your story down, moving on to something else. The way I think a lot of adult readers are much more likely to, give someone more of a chance okay. I mean, I've had so many friends reading books saying, well, I didn't really like the first 100 pages, but now it's getting good. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I do that too as a reader, but I'm thinking kids will never do that unless they're forced. If they give you a paragraph, you're lucky, I think, really. It's just, they're not going to read something that just doesn't ring true for them or ring authentic, or unless it's for school, which is a whole other topic. But, so
Right.
I try really hard I try.
Well, if we can talk about process just for a little bit. How much time do you spend writing? How do you carve out writing time? Are you one of those writers that sits down at a certain time every day and writes for either a certain number of words or a certain amount of time? Do you adhere to a certain structure, or are you sort of the opposite end where you write in whatever time you have or whenever the moment strikes you?
I think when I'm like really drafting, like especially a first draft of something where I am just wanting to get like a whole draft out. So that's just really what I call my most creative writing time. I I'm a kitchen timer kind of person. I try not to be precious about like where I am or anything of that nature, because I really want to be someone who can write anywhere. If I'm in a coffee shop, if I go to a library, if I'm at home, if I'm away from home, I want to be able to find that place where I can sit down for whatever time I have, an hour or 2 hours, and work on something. And I really do often, especially if I am in kind of a schedule where it's like, okay, I'm working on a first draft of something. So I have the story coming out, day to day. I try to set the timer and say, I'm not getting up. I'm just going to sit here for 2 hours and whatever comes out is going to come out. And then revision is different. I mean, that's a different kind of creativity, because a lot of revision time is not actually writing, like word count writing. It's reading, thinking, picking things apart, researching something that is not right. And so that's a little bit different, although I still will often use a kitchen timer and just say, all right, these are my 2 hours. I'm not getting up till I have been here for 2 hours and get X amount done. Like if I sometimes I'll set a page amount, like I need to revise 20 pages, or I need to write 1,000 words. I mean, sometimes I'll do that, but mostly it's a time thing. It's like, okay, this is my time. I'm going to sit here for these couple hours and not move.
Well, you mentioned you have another book coming out in summer of 2026. So in the meantime, if people want to learn more about you and your books, short stories, look for the new release when it's out, where can they go to find you and that kind of information?
Okay, well, I have a website. It's mimatipper.com, and all of my information is on that website as far as what social media. I have a Substack, and I use Instagram and Facebook also, and pretty much I think Facebook and Instagram are places where I definitely post things. So that's Mima Tipper at Mima, yeah, I guess at Mima Tip and Mima Tipper on Facebook. But I think the website really is going to have the widest array of information about what I'm doing, what I'm working on.
Good. And if people want to purchase a copy of Cat's Greek Summer, where can they go to buy it?
Well, if you're wanting to support a Vermont local indie bookshop, you can go to Inklings Children's Books, and that would be going on to Instagram and following Inklings Children's Books, and my book can be purchased there. There's a link on that site, and also at Phoenix Books, which is another larger Vermont indie that will be carrying my books online. And then otherwise, on my website, there are tabs for bookshop.org if you have your own local store that you want to support. And of course, the book is distributed by Simon & Schuster. So there's a Simon & Schuster tab where the book can be purchased directly through them. And, other online options are on there as well, depending on how you like to shop. But I always encourage people I hope they'll go into their local independent bookstore and order a copy or ask for a copy there.
Good. Well, Mima, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast, and I want to wish you luck with Cat's Greek Summer.
Oh, thank you.
And the new one. We will look forward to that next year. So Congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far. Best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed being here.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.